right, we are rolling.
Cool.
Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Petri Dish. I'm Abe Epperson, and I'm here with my co-host,
Cristian Ramirez. Hello, everyone.
And as always, we talk about where pop culture, specifically sci-fi pop culture, and real science meet.
Yeah.
And how they interact with each other and talk to each other on a social kind of way.
Yeah.
So today, what are we talking about?
Today, we are going to talk about climate change, specifically a specific scenario that we came across that's actually been popularized of late called Hothouse Earth.
Hothouse Earth, which is a brand of climate change saying this is a possible scenario that we're going to be in if these feedback loops really fuck us, which looks like they will. So here we are. But like there's other I just wanted to open up the podcast that there's other scenarios that people say no, it's the salination of the oceans that are going to really get us, and that's going to create something.
Yeah, we could have Snowball Earth again, or
once again,
not as likely.
We're looking at a bunch of different things between the weather, the oceans, you know, like, and the components and organic materials and non-organic materials that are really fucking us up in our watershed, and how water works around the globe, on a global level, I should say, how those attributes are really gonna fuck us up. What kind of what movies are we going to be talking about? Or I mean, like, what should they be thinking of?
Yeah, for this one, I mean, Hothouse Earth doesn't have any super specific ones. Like Day After Tomorrow is definitely climate change apocalypse.
I fucking love that movie. No, I'm honest. Because someone was writing about how, and I actually kind of, I'm less of a dummy on this topic than I am on most of the topics that you bring, but you're obviously our in-house, physician. But like, someone was writing about how, like, up to a moment in Act 1, everything that the Day After Tomorrow says is absolutely right. It's just when they are like, oh, it's a triple storm, it's a global storm, like when they start talking about that shit. But like all of the science behind it, if you go back, there's actually, like, people are like, it's not bad. Yeah. All the scientists are like, I mean, they're talking about the right thing. Right. Which is different from most other pop culture that talks about this kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, like Interstellar did it pretty well with the idea of like corn,
the blight,
subsisting a little longer. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of them are just like, we just need to get this unobtainium and go into the core and relaunch the core, like so. But anyway, is there any other shout outs of
That's the biggest one that I can think of, because everything else seems to think that we're going to end up like the climate change apocalypse is going to be cold, which I guess is a possible scenario, like Snowpiercer. But no, like this is for Hothouse Earth specifically. I think this one is a generally newer idea because humans haven't experienced that before. We experienced an ice age, or the end of an ice age. We experienced the end of the interglacial period between glacial/interglacial cycle. So we experienced one of those already, because that's when we were evolving. That's why Neanderthals were shaped differently than other humans.
Oh, interesting.
But because they lived in the cold. But yeah, so that's kind of like, I guess, what we're afraid of. But the thing that we should be afraid of is the world getting too hot and then being uninhabitable, because we can survive the cold. We don't know how much heat we can actually survive.
Yeah. And I also wanted to point out that the only thing that 2012 got right is that John Cusack should be a limo driver. That's the only science that has any founding in this.
He really can drive, though. He's a great driver.
He's a great driver. I mean, you see him, he's like dodging palm trees and like doing like hops and stuff. Yeah. That's crazy. All right, let's talk about science, and like what that 2 degrees Celsius means and like the impacts of, because it's almost always talked about politically, about the socio-political ramifications of it, like jobs and how the economy will be affected and how like housing will be affected. Yeah. But those are really just results, and they're symptoms of a thing that we're going to be talking about more. So you should do a spiel.
Yes. So right now we're already expecting experiencing some of the effects. We've had about a 1 degree Celsius increase in the global temperature since the Industrial Revolution, and 2/3 of that degree Celsius has happened since 1970. So we're already going at a pretty accelerated pace, and scientists know that it's between 1 degree and 3 degrees Celsius is the point of no return. For sure, 3 degrees Celsius increase, and we're done. Then we won't be able to stop it.
What do you mean when you say we're done?
Humans will not be able to repair the damage that we're doing once it gets to that point.
What does that look like?
3 degrees Celsius means that we end up creating a positive feedback loop of heat that melts all of the polar and Antarctic ice, all the polar ice, and increases the sea levels to a point where it takes away a lot of the beaches that we have now, and otherwise completely decimates the ecology of the Earth currently that we are able to survive
So
on.
Animals die, new animals persist, stuff like that. And also the beach cities or the coastal cities where most of the Earth lives, because since we've ever been a thing, we've been go to the water. Mm-hmm. So those 80% of the population, I believe, or something like that, is by within miles of oceans or the coast or whatever it is. So no good for them.
Very bad. Very bad.
Not a happy day.
No. And
it's also is in this hothouse Earth concept, what are the symptoms or the ramifications of it in terms of are we talking huge storms and because that's what I always hear about, is that we're going to have wetter winters and wetter everything, and also things are going to be colder but also hotter over here, which is why they designated it instead of global warming, climate change or climate change. Just because it's no, over there where it was a desert, it's now tundra, you know, those kind of things. Is that a part of this hothouse Earth?
It really there will be certain small pockets that freeze while everyone else is dying of heat. Basically, it's going to create the situation that happened in the Permian-Triassic extinction event, which was an event that killed 95% of all life on Earth.
And this is the the one that killed the dinosaurs.
No, the one before the dinosaurs that actually killed more.
The Triassic. Oh yeah.
It's the Permian-Triassic. It's called the Great Dying sometimes because only 5% of life on Earth survived. And a lot of that came from the Earth was a snowball Earth at the time, and then a lot of volcanic activity increased the temperature of Earth, changed the sea levels rapidly, and then also had immense algae blooms that killed a lot of life in the oceans. And so with all of that happening, it completely disrupted the food chains, and almost everything, all but 5% of the life on the Earth died. And so we are going to create a similar situation to that, but through man-made means from all the greenhouse gases. And once we get to the point where, there's a certain point that we're not sure exactly where it is, but it's between 2 and 3 degrees Celsius, that the glaciers are melting at a rate that it's unstoppable, that the ice is going to just be gone afterwards, because of the fact that ice is the lightest, the brightest material that reflects the most sunlight back into space, and ocean water is the darkest material on the Earth that sucks it up. And creates
do not that's when something in environmental science said recently in last year's EPA report was it's pretty simple. The problem here is that people do underestimate how much the oceans really affect climate shift, I guess, but in general, just how watershed events, and as we salinate the oceans and fresh water rises to the top because salt water is denser, so that becomes deep water kind of thing. You have this fucking of the currents. And it's really simple because it's just when we say 70% of the globe is covered by water. We're not kidding.
Yeah.
You know, like you mostly live on land animals.
Yeah.
But the ocean is so vast and so large and so a part of how the sun interacts with our little, you know, dust mote, that it's just crazy how much the oceans that we are consistently fucking are going to affect planetary kind of just how the system works, with the ins and the outs of the system. Like I'm looking at a diagram right now that basically has this loop, which is the warm surface flow and cool subsurface flow, which is like in the north of the Pacific Ocean, kind of near North America, that cuts out Alaska. There's this warm current that kind of cuts through the equator, that kind of goes through like, I don't know, Malaysia and Indonesia, cuts over Australia. There's a little bit more feeding from the Indian Ocean. It kind of goes below toward Antarctica, below Africa, and then sweeps up into Europe, now just kind of riding the Atlantic Ocean. And then that's when it becomes cold. It brings down from like Greenland and the northern pole all this cold water that cuts out the other side, the eastern side of North America, down South America, down all across Antarctica, and then back up into the Pacific Ocean. So you have this kind of Escher-esque kind of ribbon loop that is essentially where warm and cold water goes. And obviously, you know, the colder water's below and stuff like that. But when you have these kind of density changes and you have like more salt and you also have heat having a new dynamic in terms of like, if we were to have, you mentioned before the podcast, like forming Venus or forming like a greenhouse gas kind of, I mean, just greenhouse. That's what Venus is just this smorgasbord of just complex compounds that make up the atmosphere. We're just fucking with that. And I think the problem with this type of science is that no one knows exactly where this is going to go. They have good feelings about the trends, and they can use the science to say like, oh, this is picking up. And that's going to create a feedback loop. For example, one environmental scientist grimly said in, I believe, like 2013, talking about Finding Nemo, and about how it's because coral is now it's not extinct right now, but there's nothing we can do unless there's a crazy like coral machine that we make or something like that, or like we desalinate the oceans on mass scale, which has its own repercussions to the, you know, marine life. But that's a period piece now, because that no longer exists. You know, you can't, coral will be completely different if not replaced by something else. And if anyone's wondering, coral is essentially one of the things, just like, you know, algae and, you know, of course, not just in the reefs, but like kelp and stuff like that. That's the trees of the forest. So they're the ones that are pumping in CO2 and other compounds and spitting out oxygen into the water. And when we start losing that kind of thing, everyone's loud about deforestation because it's like the Amazon, but I like the Amazon. That's a thing that I know. But it's just like, what about the Great Barrier Reef? Well, unless you're a scuba diver, you don't really give a fuck. And that's one of the problems, is that no one really gives a fuck about it. So it's very grim.
Because it's underwater, and even though
it's out of sight, out of mind.
Most of our planet, and that's where most of the CO2 to oxygen exchange comes from, is the water. It comes from plants that are in the water, not the plants that are on the earth. So and so now we're going to have a complete change of marine wildlife, and the ecosystem will be completely fucked. I mean, I want to say like I have a crystal ball and just say like it's all going to be sharks. There's only going to be sharks. And so it's just like like the oceans will just be sharks. And but I can't say that with, no one can really say exactly what the, you know, melting pot is gonna like spit out. We are seeing a lot of jellyfish. That's one thing that jellyfish are doing well. Yeah, they're and of course that's not good for a lot of other animals in the ocean. That's great because they'll sting the sharks. No, but that's, I mean, we laugh, but we also cry inside.
that's the thing with this EPA report, and that's something I wanted to mention too. I know
the most recent
we're
one.
going to be back and forth, and I still want you to, because you have some. I see that you have scribblings here that I want you to quote and stuff like that. But I've been reading the EPA reports and like the Paris Climate Agreement, and it's been like a pet project of mine for the last decade. And reading it and learning and I knew nothing. I took an environmental science class in high school, like they called it APES because it was AP Environmental Science, and it's one of those like oh captain my captain teachers who was like very good, and he ushered on us a very very salient message, which is that one of the biggest problems in the world is not a matter of like everyone goes crazy because they hear climate change and they think, oh, you're one of those. You're one of the people who just think that the world is going to be 2012 and John Cusack's going to be a taxi or a limo driver. But he's like, not like you got to dispel that mythos or that myth, because when it comes down to it, like there's a lot of things that we can solve, and one of them is that like food is not. It's not that it doesn't exist and able to feed the 7 to 8 billion population we have. It's about distribution and stuff like that. And he was very well versed, but also very like, let's not freak out. Here's what we can do. And that was very helpful. Now, the reason I bring that whole thing up is that if you've been reading in like from the Obama to now the Trump administration, because it's nice. You see a bird with oil on it, or you see you see an endangered species, it makes you sad. But like really at the end of the day, it's just not a voting issue when you don't have like money in your pocket and like the world is racist and stuff like that. But like I just want to like quote the so Pruitt, right? He's head of EPA. Like the kind of conversations that they're having like on a like, and this is not just senators, this is like PhDs. This is people who they talk to get their information. And when they kind of have their expos, they kind of have these people talk at them. And the conversation is completely changed in the last decade. And it's something no one's really talking about. And the way it's changed is that, for example, Angela Logomasani, who's a senior fellow, Competitive Enterprise Institute. I looked into this institute. It's not necessarily the worst institute of all the institutes, but it's like pretty right leaning. So that gives you kind of some sense of what this person's going to say. But Pruitt's action to deny chloropyrifos, which is just it's like CFCs. It's just a compound that we use essentially to, I believe it's essentially an insecticide. Sets an important pro-science approach to the regulation that the agency should continue to follow. Cal Dooley, President and Chief Executive Officer of the American Chemistry Council, says, we commend the Administrator Pruitt for his attention in improving efficiency of new chemical review under amended TSCA, which is just a stipulation of a bunch of rules. The conversation and the things that they say, these are just two like random things that I pulled out. But if you look at the actual EPA report, there's a section that they always have that's quote what they're saying. And it's always this conversation by the politicians and people who ought to know that they basically skirt under the table. They all admit that there is a problem. They admit, and they almost 100%. I mean, it's basically up there that we are affecting climate change. But all their conversations are, we're doing a little bit good here. We're doing a little bit of good here, because that's somewhere where the scientists who are like freaking out and the politicians who are let's not freak out can actually agree. Is like, let's save that bird that's got oil on it, and it's just not enough. It's this conversation that no one, in the same way that journalists seem to have a problem like going up to Trump and saying like, yeah, but the thing you said was a lie. Well, explain what you lied right now. What's going on? Are you going to take that back, or am I wrong? Like, why do I think you're lying right now? Explain to me what's going on. There's this big theater of like, I'm calling you out, EPA. There's this big theater of people who are just like trying their best to do the right thing.
Sure.
But they're basically doing the equivalent of what we're doing, which is we're laughing outside and we're crying inside.
Yeah.
It's like everyone knows that there's a huge problem and everyone's just commending each other on like little systematic steps, change, which is just not enough.
Right.
And that's something that I think is like, talk about like the undercurrents of the oceans and the salination of the oceans. This is the undercurrent of the political society right now.
Right.
Where it's just happy to disagree, but on the stuff that no one could possibly disagree about, let's just agree about it.
Sure.
And then just at least be like, oh yeah, clap, 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 clap. Look, we're all happy. Everything's doing well. We at least did save that bird.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, fuck the bird. Not all birds. I mean, well, I have weird political views, but like not fuck all birds, but like that bird doesn't really alter like the grand scheme of things. So from a utilitarian perspective, and we got to kind of think kind of draconian about this shit because it's the only Earth we got. So if we're already damned, we gotta try harder, man.
Yeah.
So that's my spiel. I'll cut out and let you speak, but that's just something I need to get off my chest.
No, I agree, because if the bird is not as important as those 3 degrees Celsius, because once we get to those 3 degrees, then a lot of birds are going to be done. It's not just that one bird.
Exactly.
And this is something that recently Congresswoman-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was talking about. They're talking about doing a Green New Deal plan right now. Yeah. And she took some heat from the right and stuff for saying that it's going to take the amount of dedication and the amount of like political force as something like the Civil Rights Act or something that was that large. And she took heat for it, but she's being realistic. To completely change our society in a way that is going to prevent us from going up those extra 2 degrees is going to take a lot, because right now the fossil fuel industries have their claws in so many things with lobbying and just in our government that it is a daunting task to actually change the way that we use energy, to change our entire infrastructure, to change all of that. And that's what we have to do, or we're going to poison the planet for us.
Right.
There's no in between. We either have to completely change or we're going to die doing what we're already doing.
Right. What do you think is, let's hop back a little bit and talk about sci-fi for a second about that, because I think that that's a really interesting notion, especially given that not that there isn't a time limit to things like socio-political struggles.
Sure.
There is a time limit because we hope to be less racist before we leave the earth. But why? Because there's going to be a lot of people who like fucking die because of racism. So there is a time limit there.
Sure.
But there's also like a big clock in the sky that we just don't even know what the time limit is, but we know it's ticking with the environment. And so in science fiction, like what methods do you convince? Like, so the question came up in the 70s and even before that, but like, when do we turn the car off?
Right.
And we seem to be, doing better. I mean, like almost 30% of California, for example, the grid that you use if you plug in something in your house or whatnot, it's coming from solar and wind power. It's like we're doing pretty good in some areas and obviously California is lucky because California has like so many areas where you can put wind power or sun power, or like Texas, it's just got a lot of landmass. Vermont's not going to be like, yeah, we kind of got fucked in the solar regard, or Delaware, but like, I'm trying to think of a non-Big Brother, a non-like socialist kind of like Brave New World kind of form of government that's just like, kids, shut the fuck up. We got to do this.
Yeah.
We got to do this by 2050.
Yeah.
Like what methods of political change are available to us even at this point? What kind of society in like that we've seen in fiction or not, like actually could do something where it's just like, is that just a totalitarian regime at that point? Is it just take a tyrant who's just like, I care only about the environment?
I mean, the Federation in Star Trek seems like that's a kind of a staple of this podcast.
I'm gonna call you out. That's a cop out, though, because that's like, imagine we're already utopian.
Right.
No, money has been abolished. We have these holodecks where everyone's getting their dick sucked all the time. Everything's great.
But no, yeah, it does kind of take that level of control though, too, because I mean, I'm going to sound like a socialist or an anarchist or whatever, but capitalism isn't doing it. Like,
yeah, how do you privatize safety?
Right. There's
other than like a car where it's like, yeah, it's a good seatbelt. There's not a lot of money in seatbelts.
Right. That's true.
Especially because the guy who invented the seatbelt was like, he gave it away.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
Like the patent was like, everyone should have this.
Exactly. Yeah, because everyone should have it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that we do need, with the way that capitalism is working right now, the only thing that could save us is, I don't know, some billionaire who is obsessed with renewable energy or getting us completely free from fossil fuels. That's like, if
you're just pitching Elon Musk right now. Oh, that's so great. No, but you're right. I mean,
under capitalism, that's all that we,
because you fight within the capitalist system, and that's capital is what makes that work. So
exactly.
Someone who has an enormous amount of capital would be able to be like, I'm going to use my money to save us. And don't go to Mars. I mean, go to Mars, but
we need to fix things here first.
I'm going to take your money. I'm going to take all the things you're doing and just do better. And that's such a shitty thing to ask of like an Elon Musk, who's got his own issues. And
sure.
A lot of people like to shit on him, and I'm fine with shitting on him because he's like, he's not the greatest person, but like he's doing a lot of great stuff. And he's also like, when it comes down to it, he's just a fucking nerd. A guy doesn't even know how to smoke a spliff, like and he says these weird things, and he's on Twitter doing memes, and like I remember Cody and I having like a pretty big argument about it. He was just like, what the fuck is he doing? And I'm like, yeah, but who cares? The guy can fucking be an idiot and do memes in his spare time. He spends way more time a day worrying about rockets than we do. That's kind of a plus column. I'm just going to say it's a pretty big thing in the plus column. I'm not defending Elon Musk on everything, or even most of it. I'm just saying at least he's using his $1 billion like a Bill Gates or something like that, instead of like a fucking, I don't know, one of the Walmart
Saudi royal family
people. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I know that is exactly the kind of thinking that I was just criticizing, which is just like, it's just, at least it's one in the win column, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the kind of trajectory we're talking about here.
Yeah. The only thing that we can do as individuals is, because yes, recycling and all that stuff is good. You should do that. And if you don't want to eat meat, then don't eat meat. But at the same time, if you are not voting for people whose part of their agenda is to completely change the way that industrial fishing, industrial meat, industrial power production, if they are not concerned with changing the way that those things work right now, because those are the things that are killing the planet, then you doing something individually is not making that big a deal.
Yeah.
We have to elect people that actually give a shit about the things that are going to destroy the planet.
Right. It's so easy to turn to someone and say to a politician, like they did with Al Gore, they're like, you talk about the environment all the time, but you're flying on private jets way more than like a poor person in Chicago is. And he's just like, all right, man. Yeah, you're right. And I wish that was the kind of conversation we're having, where it's like we fight that kind of, there's one bad aspect of the thing that you're saying, or you're slightly hypocritical because you're doing something that isn't exactly what you're preaching. That means that we should throw out your conversation.
Right.
We need to combat that and I think it starts with the environment, because it's so dire.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, I mean, it is dire in both like the consequences, definitely. But it's dire because the conversation is not even in an uphill trajectory to get us to this spot where we're talking about like by 2050, how do we not make coral extinct?
Yeah.
Because there's so many feedback loops. There's so many things that like enter each other's conversations. And by that, I mean like the salination of the oceans or the melting of the permafrost versus like the glaciers. The composite event is the tendrils are so inside each other that we don't even know how much they interact.
Right.
We have a feeling because it's like, oh, I see that CO2 goes up and this happens.
We can try to treat symptoms as much as we want by building seawalls and, I don't know, building levees and stuff like that. But that's a symptom treatment. It's not treating the thing that is actually the problem.
Yeah.
Because like I'm positive that there are conservative politicians that are from areas requesting money for levees and seawalls and stuff like that, who at the same time deny that climate change exists. And that's the kind of stuff that we cannot suffer that anymore. That is something that we do not have time to be okay with. Like as a society, we have to all agree that no, if you're going to be recognizing that the seas are rising and stuff like that, then you have to also accept that climate change is a real thing. I've been past the point of like, if a politician is a climate change denier, then no, there's no way I should be voting for them. I've been that way for a long time. I just want everybody to be that way.
Right. Do you know the concept of like C2 or C4 plants in like cactus and desert plants and stuff like that, which I think it deals with the Krebs cycle, which is like just how it, after photosynthesis, how it like, that's why you get like very fibrous and like cactus is very hard and stuff like that. And it's because there was an evolutionarily advantageous, strain of plants that were like, let's get high on carbon and opposed to, somewhat another plant in a lusher area. We're going to be starting to see that kind of thing where we're going to be getting more. It's not just that the climate will be desert-like, know, it's not just that huge areas in Russia will be a desert now in the next 100 years, or at least be acting like a desert in terms of the weather. We're gonna start to see places that it's just like palm trees in Paris, like it'll be that kind of thing, and it'll start off as just weird.
Yeah. And
then it'll start seeing weird artifacts and, like you said, symptoms of climate shift. But then we're not going to realize, because we have such a short lifespan,
right? People
are going to be like, in 200 years, they're going to be like, yeah, palm trees in Paris. It's like Paris. That's just, there's palm trees everywhere. That's how it goes. And like, so people won't see it as weird. Should we care that the reefs are gone or not? In the big scheme of things, if climate just shifts.
Right. I think it will be a voting issue. I just think sociologically, we grew up in an environment where we had things like Captain Planet, and like we had all sorts of, the hippies were making cartoons for us about the environment. So I think our generation and following generations are going to care more no matter what. But I think the question behind the question of if it's just a different climate, should we care? I think that depends on your level of empathy and the amount that you care about other people, because humans evolved on the earth to exist in a certain range of temperatures and climates. The way that the time period that we evolved in was colder than it is now, but not so much colder that it's impossible for us to survive. We, as an entire, the 7 billion people of us that there are, will lose a lot of people. And of course, the people that are most affected by it will be the people that are the least financially able to deal with it. So it kind of depends on how much of a humanitarian you are to see if it matters or not. Because yes, there will be scientists that invent ways to turn crickets into a sustainable source of food for people that can afford it. But if you care about other people surviving this, then we all need to work on making sure that that the Earth doesn't turn into a drastically different climate, because they will not be the ones that survive. The unfortunate people are going to be the ones that are the most affected by it, and they will be the first ones that aren't here anywhere, that die off of the Earth. And so I guess, yeah, humans will continue to exist. I don't think this is something that's going to make us extinct, because we're the smartest creatures on the Earth. Maybe
a little sweaty.
Yeah. We'll be uncomfortable. Yeah, we can be uncomfortable and unhappy, but I think we will be able to survive in some capacity. But if we do affect the climate in such a drastic way, then most of us will not survive.
Right. And just so I understand, and it's clear for everyone listening, so your advocacy is that if you're at a party and there's someone who's not a climate denier, but like someone who's just like, I can't really care about it, it's you're arguing that the best level to convince someone that that climate change matters and that it should be a higher voting issue than it is now is because of how many people are going to die. To keep it a human element, to keep the conversation about the people and the cost of life and the quality of life of those in the areas.
I think that's going to be more effective because there are so many more of us that are not in the 1%, that can't afford.
They won't live in their Elysium domes. Right. Yeah. Or is that the which one? That's the movie where they just went to fucked off to space. Yeah. That's a good answer. Like all the rich are like, in our space capsules. It's just so weird to me because it's just like, that sounds terrible because things must have gone wrong. And there must have been at least one point when they're developing the ark or whatever, and they're just like, they look up and they're like, man, we really should. I mean, I know it sucks down there with all the pores, but man, like a lot of us are dying just by like accidents. Like, did you hear about Teddy? Yeah, I heard he got ejected into space. Yeah, that doesn't happen to rich people now.
I mean, and I think in a more practical way, maybe you convince people by letting them know that this is going to be the economy of the future because we're going to run out of fossil fuels. And so the only way that we're going to continue to be able to have a society where people have energy and have money is to convert to renewables.
That sun money.
Yeah, exactly.
See that when someone buys the sun, that's my favorite day. That is my favorite day. Because that is literally everything. It's how everything else happened. So if someone could buy the sun, like what amount of money for the sun? I don't know. Can you think of all of it? Can you literally think of all the money that has ever existed on the globe? That is the cost of the sun. So you're not even 1%. Yeah. You are 100%. You own all of the money. You can't buy the sun, but I want a piece of the sun. You know, I want like a little timeshare right there at the bottom hemisphere, the southern hemisphere. Yeah. Just be like, this is nice and toasty. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of conversation we're having. Yeah. It's like, should we buy the sun? That's what I feel like is the kind of conversation that's happening politically right now, when the reality needs to be talking about, like, we got to do something about this fucking salt. Yeah. You know, and like, we're not talking about the right things because it's hard to talk about the right things. It's hard to talk about. Like, it feels like we're in that, like, Black Panther moment, not the movie, the movement, like, where it's just like, do you not see the mechanizations that are causing this? We're not saying, like, these are the problems, these are the symptoms. Yeah. How do you get a whole civilization to think in a specific way? Yeah. Because we run and hide. The second that something we hear, we're like, oh, I don't like that. You know, and it's on every side. It's just like how we do with patterns. It's just like we talked about a lot of times on this podcast. It's like, we're very good about running around in the jungle being like, that's a snake. No, it's not a snake. That's a snake. That's a snake. You know, like, we're pattern recognizers. Yeah. We're good at snakes. Are pretty good. Yeah. But our eyes and our minds are not. This is on a new level. This is on a higher, like, plane of thinking that involves time in a way that we're not usually we're usually resistant to. And I don't know what antibodies we need in our system in order to have that conversation, other than education. But the type of education in order to move quickly, to me, is one of, like I said, Big Brother. It's like where they're gonna, like, conservatives are, and like traditionalists are gonna like snap down, as they have been since like the Snopes trial. Like they're gonna snap down and be like, oh, so you just want your science to be taught. And it's just like, yeah, we want this
science.
Here's what we want. We want a hegemony on education.
Yeah.
On this issue. Like, you should not be in this conversation.
Right.
And everyone's going to be like, oh, thought police. And they're right, but they don't matter that they're right. Like,
Exactly.
It's the type of right that doesn't matter. Because it needs to happen. And so I sound like a fucking acolyte. And I understand that. I understand that I'm a zealot of this.
Yeah.
And I think that there shouldn't be any other conversation.
Yeah.
And I understand that people react very negatively to that.
Yeah.
But I don't understand. I don't see how you cross and shake the hands on Congress, across Congress, and say, like, these are the things that we need.
We can either all be environmentalist zealots, or we can ruin the earth for us. I'm sorry, but that's kind of what it's coming down to at this point.
Yeah.
We just stop listening to the people that don't care about the earth, because we need it.
But instead we have fucking John Cusack and like fucking the fucking like waves that are on like the Himalayas and shit. It's just like, you don't understand how thermodynamics works at all. You don't understand how gravity works at this point. Like, at this point, it's like, yeah, it's like how did that happen? Well, you just, like, someone took the earth and just shook it, and all the water went to one side. It's just like, that's the kind of conversation that was in 2011 or 2012, right? And that wasn't that long ago. It feels forever ago because of how much society's changed, but not in this way. People are still like, you gotta go into the core and blow up all these bombs. And the populace buys it. It's like it's an opiate of thinking. It's it's. I don't know. I don't feel like I can continue this podcast anymore. I'm just rambling. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Christian.
In defense of the movie 2012, during the KT extinction, which was the one that killed the dinosaurs, that one actually the meteor that hit, the comet that hit, created a wave that was over a mile high and traveling faster than the speed of sound when it hit the Rockies. So you can have a wave that big.
That's true. That's true. That's the equivalent of globally shaking it.
Yeah, exactly.
So all water goes on one side. Is an enormous earthquake. Yeah, you're right about that, I guess.
But like, that's not the important part of this podcast. The important part is only vote for people who care about climate change.
Is that the point of the podcast? I didn't even know that.
I don't. Yeah, if somebody's got a problem with climate change being a real thing, then they probably haven't listened to the podcast anyways. So
yeah, I'm just tapped out, man. I've never given up on a podcast before.
It's okay. I understand it.
Like, there's only so much liberty we can take from people at one time, or with a generation, and say, like, you don't get that anymore. No more car for you. That when that happens, people are like, well, fuck you. Yeah. And that's the problem with hegemonies, and the totalitarian system that I'm asking for, is that we're like, no more car for you. And people are going to be very angry about that. And so, and even if it starts working, even if we're like 10 years into the great experiment of no more car for you, the problem is that within, like, our lifetime is so short that we'll be like, yeah. Hear that guy Abe who's talking about no more car for you? Well, I got this guy that I heard about. He's talking about car for you. And you like that? And he's like, I fucking love car for me. I'm voting for that guy. Yeah. So that's all I have.
I love it. No, that's good.
What else you got? Anything else you want to talk about?
That's pretty much it.
I promise we have the 2 next episodes queued up. They're a lot less They're fun episodes.
Yeah.
This is not a fun episode.
Right. Yeah. So we've got one shot at this.
Yeah. We're all Luke Skywalkers turning off the computer and firing into the Death Star.
We got to do it.
But thank God we got practice with these womp rats. You know what I'm saying? No, we don't have any fucking womp rats. We're not Luke Skywalker. This is not a fucking game. This is not a fucking game. I am not suited for this podcast. Well, we have to admit at one point or another the pop culture reason that these movies exist, like the reason that we keep going to them, it's like, oh fuck yeah. Look at that! This Dante's Peak is on fire. It's just like it's cool to look at. Yeah. But then it's just like, oh yeah, also got to think about all those people who are dying. Support the troops. Support the troops. I am really just a pessimist.
It's like in Miami Connection at the end of the movie. It has the quote about violence.
Yeah, it's just like, but sometimes it makes you think, huh? Sometimes it makes you think. Dante's Peak. Whoa. Nothing good is gonna happen. I've determined. I haven't given up. I haven't given up. I haven't given up. Anything else?
No, I haven't given up, Abe.
Yeah.
I think we can do it.
Well, let's shut this fucking episode up and talk about like guns and stuff.
Yeah, fun stuff.
See you in like a few weeks.
Yeah.
You fucking people. We love you.
We love you. Bye.
Whoa. Hey, everybody. Swaim here. With added excitement in my voice because it might equate to money for me. I just wanted to officially let everyone know through the medium of audio rather than tweets that Small Beans has a merch store now. Yeah, that's right. And this is not just some cash grab with the logos of our shows, although you can get logo tees there if you'd like. We worked very hard with several very talented artists to really present you with shirts and buttons and content to come that we really think is worth your purchase and you're going to enjoy. And if you're someone who hasn't been able to patronize us, this is a fantastic way to support Small Beans directly without having to sign up for Patreon. And of course, you get a physical item in return rather than just our glorious content, which will remain free, but is not free to make. So we'd really appreciate anyone who's willing to check out the SB merch store. It is at smallbeans.bigcartel.com, and there you will find a bunch of hilarious shirt designs, some limited edition buttons, as well as an ever-increasing amount of audio content to download. We're talking original rap songs, audiobook versions of short stories, and so on. And we're always brainstorming and trying to add new things to the shop, but we'll stop if no one goes there. So please check it out, smallbeans.bigcartel.com. And as always, we love you. 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 We love you.